Welcome to Tell Me More Stories Told Us podcast. Buckle up, everyone,
Yeah, get ready.
because we're about to embark on, an electrifying journey, you could say,
Mm.
into the world of hydrogen vehicles.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating area.
You sent us a great collection of information, and our mission really is to distill it all down, find the most captivating, the most crucial insights.
Forget the dry manuals.
Exactly. No dry facts here. We're uncovering an adventure, really, in engineering and energy.
And it's not just about what's happening now. We're looking at the surprising history and the potential, the intriguing potential of harnessing hydrogen power. It's a story that, spans centuries, different technologies, from pushing us into space to maybe, just maybe, powering our everyday drives.
And speaking of history,
Yeah.
get this blew my mind. The very first engine designed to run on hydrogen.
Yeah.
It was conceived way back in 1807.
Wow, 1807. That's really something.
Can you believe it? Over 200 years ago,
Yeah.
someone was already tinkering with this. It really makes you think, doesn't it? How long this idea has been kind of simmering.
It really does. And that early invention, it highlights this long-held fascination, with hydrogen as a power source.
Right.
And the motivations, well, they haven't really changed all that much. People want to move beyond fossil fuels, reduce our climate impact, breathe cleaner air in cities.
Sure, pretty basics.
But, and this is the big, that we'll keep coming back to, the environmental benefits. They really hinge on producing that hydrogen cleanly.
That's the absolute key, isn't
It's
it?
the whole puzzle piece. Yeah, if you're making hydrogen using fossil fuels, well,
You're kind of defeating the purpose.
exactly. So, yeah, clean production is crucial.
And it's good to remember there are basically two main ways hydrogen gets used to, make things move.
Right.
The most common one today is fuel cells. Hydrogen reacts with oxygen, makes electricity.
And that electricity drives the motors, like in an electric car, but with hydrogen as the fuel tank, basically.
Right. And the other way, it kind of echoes that 1807 invention.
Direct combustion, burning hydrogen in a modified engine, like a gasoline engine.
But with a very different exhaust, mostly water vapor.
Much less common commercially right now, but definitely part of the story.
Okay, let's dive in. First stop on this adventure, rockets.
Yeah, rocketry. It's one of the earliest, and you could argue most successful chapters for hydrogen. Liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen, LH2LOX as it's known.
LH2LOX.
It's been a real workhorse fuel. Loads of major rocket stages used it. The Centaur stage was a big landmark, the first to use it.
So what makes it so good for, blasting off into space? What's the secret sauce?
Well, there are a few things. First, LH2LOX gives you a very high effective exhaust velocity.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
Think of it like the speed the stuff shoots out the back. Faster it goes, the more thrust, the more efficiency you get.
Gotcha. More push.
Exactly. And hydrogen itself, it packs a serious punch in terms of energy per pound or per kilogram compared to other common rocket fuels.
So you need less fuel weight for the same energy.
Pretty much. Overall, it gives you the best efficiency for the amount of propellant you burn.
Sounds like the perfect rocket fuel then. So why don't all rockets use it? What are the downsides?
There are always trade-offs, aren't there?
Always.
Big ones here. Liquid hydrogen is incredibly light, very low density,
Okay.
which means you need huge tanks to store enough of it, much bigger and heavier than tanks for, say, kerosene or methane.
Bigger tanks mean a bigger, heavier rocket overall.
Right. Plus, it has to be kept incredibly cold. Cryogenic temperatures.
Freezing cold.
Colder than freezing. We're talking hundreds of degrees below zero. So you need massive insulation, which adds even more weight and complexity.
Okay, bigger tanks, super cold. Any other catches?
Yep. Hydrogen boil-off. Even with the best insulation, some of that liquid hydrogen just evaporates, turns back into gas.
So you lose fuel just sitting there.
You do. It means rockets using LH2LOX often have to be fueled pretty close to launch time. Can't just sit there ready to go for days.
Limits your options for quick launches. Okay, I see the challenges.
Yeah.
But there's a cool connection here, something even the astronauts use directly.
Exactly. The space shuttle, a classic example, it used LH2LOX for its big main engines, of course.
Yeah.
But it also had hydrogen fuel cells on board. Not for propulsion, but to generate electricity for all the shuttle systems. Lights, computers, everything.
Wow. So like a little power station inside.
Pretty much. And here's the really neat part. The byproduct of those fuel cells making electricity.
No, was it?
Pure water. H2O.
No way.
Yep. And the astronauts actually use that water for drinking, for rehydrating food, you name it.
Talk about recycling. Using your fuel's exhaust to live. That's incredible.
Resourcefulness in space, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so from escaping Earth's gravity, let's bring it down to Earth, to our streets. Automobiles. What's the hydrogen car scene looking like today?
Well, as of, say, 2021 or so, the main players you could actually find in showrooms in very specific markets, mind you, were the Toyota Mirai and the Hyundai Nexo.
Right, I've heard of those.
Honda had their Clarity fuel cell car for a while, but they stopped making it in 2021. They did just bring out something new in 2024, the CRVE FC EV.
Oh, a CRV version.
Yeah, but it's lease only right now and in really limited numbers, so availability is still, well, limited.
And just to be clear, these are mostly fuel cell electric vehicles, right?
Right.
Hydrogen making electricity to power the wheel.
Exactly. We're not really talking about widespread hydrogen combustion engine cars you can buy. It's mainly fuel cells.
Okay, so we have these few models now, but when did this idea of hydrogen cars really start getting serious? What were the big milestones?
Oh, it goes back further than you might think. The very first road vehicle with a hydrogen fuel cell, the Chevrolet Electrovan, 1966.
66? Wow.
Yeah.
An old Chevy van running on hydrogen.
Yep. A groundbreaking experiment, really. But it didn't exactly lead straight to consumer cars.
Right. Probably pretty clunky back then.
You could say that. Things picked up pace later. 2002 was a big year. Toyota brought out the FCHV. Honda had the FCX. These were the first commercially available, government-certified hydrogen fuel cell cars. They started leasing them out in December 2002.
Leasing, not selling yet.
Mostly leasing, yeah. Then in 2008, Honda really pushed things with the FCX Clarity.
The Clarity, right. What was special about that one?
It was designed from the get-go as a fuel cell vehicle, not just a modified gas car. And Honda actually set up the first proper dealer network just for fuel cell cars.
Sounds like Honda was really trying to make it happen early on.
They were definitely pioneers. Then in 2013, Hyundai jumped in with the Tucson FCEV.
The Tucson SUV.
Yeah, a fuel cell version. They called it the world's first mass-produced hydrogen car, but again, it was lease only, and the numbers, well, they didn't exactly scream mass production.
Infrastructure probably still a big issue then, and cost.
Big time. Limited places to refuel, high vehicle costs. It held things back. Hyundai followed up with the Nexo later, and Toyota kept developing the Mirai, which is the first dedicated mass-produced fuel cell car when it launched properly in late 2014.
Okay, so we've had these pioneers, these different attempts.
Yeah.
But how does it stack up against, well, the elephant in the room? Battery electric vehicles.
Ah, yeah, that's where the picture gets stark. Let's look at the end of 2022. Total global sales of fuel cell electric vehicles, lifetime, around 70,200.
70,000, okay.
Now, plug-in electric vehicles, battery EVs, and plug-in hybrids sold in that same period.
How many?
26 million.
Million, wow. Okay, that's a huge difference.
It's massive. And if you look just at the U.S. in 2023, about 3,100 hydrogen cars sold. Compare that to 380,000 battery electric vehicles.
Good grief. So EVs has just taken off in a way hydrogen hasn't.
Absolutely. The rapid improvement in batteries range, charging speed, plus the build-out of charging stations, it's really changed the game and, frankly, shrunk the expected role for hydrogen in personal cars.
Yeah, it seems the momentum for hydrogen cars has definitely slowed. But I did see an interesting idea. Maybe a niche role for hydrogen in keeping old cars alive.
That is a fascinating thought that's bubbling up. As everything moves electric, what happens to all the classic gasoline cars?
Right. They're vintage Mustangs, the old Beetles.
Exactly. Could hydrogen be a way to keep them running? Maybe directly in converted engines, or maybe using hydrogen to help make synthetic e-fuels? It's being looked at as a way to preserve automotive heritage, potentially in a cleaner way.
A zero-emission classic car. That's a cool image.
Oh.
But it hasn't all been smooth sailing for the hydrogen cars that are out there, right? I heard about some issues.
Unfortunately, yeah. There have been bumps. Hyundai had to recall all 1,600 Nexos sold in the U.S. up to October 2024.
Why was that?
Risk of fuel leaks, potential fires, a faulty pressure relief device, apparently.
Yikes. Leaking hydrogen sounds not good.
Not ideal, no. And then in California, also in 2024, some Toyota Mirai owners actually filed a class action lawsuit.
What was their complaint?
Basically, lack of hydrogen fuel. They argue there weren't enough reliable stations, that they were misled. And issues around warranty, too.
Really highlights those infrastructure and reliability problems we mentioned. Big hurdles.
Definitely.
It wasn't all rivalry, though, was it? Weren't some car companies working together on this stuff?
There were collaborations, yeah. Back in 2013, BMW actually leased hydrogen tech from Toyota.
Oh, interesting. Usually it's the other way around with tech sharing.
Right. And around the same time, Ford, Daimler, Mercedes-Benz and Nissan teamed up to work on hydrogen tech together.
A big alliance.
And then Toyota did something pretty bold in 2015. They offered up all their hydrogen patents, fuel cells, refueling stations, over 5,000 of them royalty-free.
Trying to kickstart the whole market.
That seemed to be the idea. Give everyone access, hope it grows faster.
Did it work?
Well, despite those efforts, by about 2020, most of the big automakers had kind of shifted their focus. They saw the writing on the wall with battery EVs taking off, the investment pouring in there.
So they pivoted towards batteries.
Largely, yes.
Yeah.
The momentum just swung heavily towards BEVs for passenger cars.
Okay, so cars. Maybe not hydrogen's strongest suit right now compared to EVs. But what about bigger vehicles, heavy trucks? Is there a different story there?
Quite possibly, yeah. The International Energy Agency, the IEA, they look at pathways to net zero emissions.
Right.
And they project hydrogen could actually meet around 30% of the energy demand for heavy trucks by 2050.
30%. That's significant. What kind of trucks?
Mainly long-distance freight, the really heavy-duty, long-haul stuff.
Why hydrogen there specifically?
Well, the potential advantages are longer range compared to current battery trucks and maybe faster refueling times. Filling a big hydrogen tank could be quicker than charging massive batteries.
Okay, so for those cross-country routes, it might make more sense.
That's the thinking. Though even in trucking, battery power is still expected to have a larger share overall, according to the IEA.
Are we seeing these hydrogen trucks on the road yet? Any real-world tests?
We are starting to. UPS was testing hydrogen delivery trucks back in 2017.
Okay, early days.
And a bigger step. Hyundai started actual commercial production of their Xcient fuel cell trucks in 2020. They shipped a batch off to Switzerland to run in real logistics operations.
Wow, commercial production. That's a step up.
Definitely. And in Australia, in 2022, they started using 5 big Class 8 hydrogen trucks to haul zinc ore from a mine to the port. Heavy-duty work.
So it's moving beyond just prototypes in the trucking world.
Slowly, but yes, it seems to have more potential traction there than in cars right now.
Okay, trucks make sense. What about flying? Airplanes? Is hydrogen going to power our flights anytime soon?
Aviation. That's
Yeah.
a tougher nut to crack, and opinions are divided. Some forecasts see a role for hydrogen, maybe in shipping too, maybe even jets. But many others think sustainable biofuels or advanced batteries might win out commercially in aviation. It's a really challenging environment.
Huge energy needs. Weight is critical.
Exactly. Still, companies are looking into it. Boeing tested a small, crewed aircraft powered by a hydrogen fuel cell way back in 2008.
A crude flight. On hydrogen.
Yep. Small plane, but still. And there have been uncrewed tests, too. The German Aerospace Center is also very active in this research.
But getting that to scale up for a big passenger jet, that seems like a massive leap.
It really does. Boeing themselves have said fuel cells probably won't power the main engines of big airliners soon. Maybe as backup power, auxiliary units, that kind of thing.
Not the main propulsion.
Probably not in the near term. Interestingly, Boeing also tested a big drone, the Phantom Eye UAV, back in 2010, and that used converted Ford internal combustion engines running on hydrogen.
So burning hydrogen again, like the old days.
Yeah, so they're exploring different angles, but widespread hydrogen flight still looks a long way off.
Okay, air seems tricky.
Mhm.
What about the sea? Ships. Can we expect hydrogen-powered cargo ships crossing the oceans?
For the really big long-distance ships, as of 2019 anyway, hydrogen fuel cells weren't seen as a practical near-term solution for main propulsion.
Similar challenges to planes. Energy density, storage.
Pretty much. The scale is just enormous. But hydrogen is being looked at for smaller, shorter distance vessels, like ferries on fixed routes, maybe as a range extender for electric ferries.
Okay, niche applications again.
Yeah. And there's also research into using ammonia. Ammonia can carry hydrogen, chemically bound, and it's easier to store and handle than pure liquid hydrogen.
So use ammonia as the fuel carrier for long-distance ships.
That's a strong possibility being explored. CSIRO in Australia is doing work on that. Easier logistics than handling cryogenic hydrogen at sea.
Okay, so maybe ammonia carrying hydrogen is the route for ships.
Mm-hmm.
Let's come back to land. Buses. Lots of cities are getting electric buses now. Where does hydrogen fit in?
Well, there have been quite a few trials and deployments of fuel cell buses. Ursus in Poland tested them in 2017. Solaris, another European maker, launched their hydrogen buses in 2019 and got orders for dozens.
So some uptake there.
Yeah, and in the U.S., Champaign, Illinois actually became the first city with a whole fleet of hydrogen buses.
A whole fleet. That's significant.
It was, but there have been setbacks too. Montpellier in France, they had a contract for hydrogen buses.
Right.
They canceled it in 2022. Why? The operating costs were 6 times higher than their electric buses.
6 times. Ouch.
Yeah.
That's a huge difference.
It's a massive economic hurdle, really shows the challenge hydrogen faces competing directly with mature battery tech in applications like city buses right now.
Cost is king, I guess. Okay, what about industrial settings? Warehouses, factories, anywhere hydrogen is making inroads there.
Definitely. Forklifts. Hydrogen forklifts are actually a noticeable growing market, especially in the U.S.
Really? Forklifts.
Yep. The first production one, based on a Linde diesel model but using a hydrogen internal combustion engine, came out in 2008.
Combustion again. Interesting.
But fuel cells are more common now. By 2013, there were around 4,000 fuel cell forklifts in the U.S. By 2024, around 50,000 worldwide, mostly still in the U.S.
50,000 is more than I would have guessed.
Yeah.
How does that compare to electric forklifts?
Still small compared to battery electric. Something like 1.2 million battery forklifts were bought in 2021 alone. But 50,000 is a solid niche.
What's the advantage? Why use hydrogen in a forklift?
A few key things. Refueling takes maybe 3 minutes.
Versus hours for a battery charge.
Exactly. Big time saver in busy warehouses. They also work well in the cold, like refrigerated warehouses. Battery performance can drop in the cold, but fuel cells keep going strong.
Okay, quick refueling, good in the cold.
And the fuel cell units are often designed to just drop into the space where the battery would go. Makes conversion easier.
Makes sense. Any downsides?
Well, for indoor use, most companies in Europe and many in the US still prefer battery electric simply because of zero local emissions. No exhaust fumes inside the building.
Right, clean air indoors is paramount. Okay, forklifts. What about trains and trams? Hydrogen on the rails.
The IEA sees a small role here too, maybe 2% of rail energy demand by 2050.
Where would that 2% be used?
Mostly on lines that are really difficult or expensive to electrify with overhead wires or third rails. Think remote lines, challenging terrain.
Where stringing up cables is just too much hassle or cost.
Exactly. And we've seen some action here. China demonstrated the first hydrogen fuel cell tram back in 2015.
A tram, okay.
And in Germany, the Karedia Island train started commercial service in 2018. These are fuel cell powered, and they even have batteries on board to store extra energy, like from braking.
Hybrid fuel cell battery trains.
Yep.
Interesting. So definitely being explored for those tricky rail routes.
Yes, where full electrification isn't practical.
It's amazing how many places hydrogen is popping up. Even tiny vehicles, bicycles, scooters.
Yep, even there, it gets pretty innovative. We saw concept hydrogen bikes way back in 2007 in China, then later in Australia, Europe.
Hydrogen bikes, how does that even work?
Usually small hydrogen canisters feeding a small fuel cell, which then provides electric assist like a regular e-bike. One French company, Pragma Industries, has their Alpha bike, claims 150-kilometer range.
150 kilometers on a bike from hydrogen. That's impressive.
They even supplied them for a G7 summit in 2019. And stand-up scooters, too. Developed in the Netherlands, getting over 20 kilometers range on just 15 grams of hydrogen.
Tiny amount of fuel.
Very small. Even hydrogen cargo bikes are being developed for city deliveries.
Sounds futuristic. But, I mean, is it efficient? Using electricity to make hydrogen to put in a fuel cell to make electricity for a bike.
Right.
Versus just charging a battery.
That is the question people raise. The round-trip efficiency, electricity to hydrogen back to electricity, it's almost certainly lower than just charging a battery directly.
Plus, you need tiny hydrogen refueling stations everywhere.
Right. The infrastructure challenge, again, just scaled down. So while innovative, the practicality and efficiency questions are definitely valid for these really small applications.
Makes sense. Okay, let's shift gears again. Military use. You wouldn't immediately think hydrogen and army.
But they are looking at it. GM Defense is quite focused on hydrogen fuel cells. They have this autonomous platform called SUSE.
Autonomous hydrogen vehicles for the military.
That's the idea. And the U.S. Army has been testing a hydrogen version of the Chevy Colorado pickup truck, the ZH2, since 2017.
What are they testing for? What are the advantages?
Things like quieter operation compared to diesel.
Stealthier.
Potentially. Also, a lower heat signature, which is important for avoiding detection. And the only emission is water, which could even be useful in some situations. They're evaluating the whole tactical picture.
Silent running, less heat. I can see the appeal. What about two wheels again, but bigger? Motorcycles, scooters.
Yep, prototypes there too. A company called ENV developed some hydrogen fuel cell electric motorbikes like the Cross Cage and Biplane. Vectrix worked on hydrogen scooters.
Any actual products?
More hybrids, really. Suzuki had a Bergman scooter that was a hydrogen fuel cell electric hybrid. It even got EU approval.
So road legal.
Apparently so.
Mm-hmm.
And Taiwan did street tests with 80 fuel cell scooters, so they were seriously evaluating them.
Seems like hydrogen's been tried in almost everything. Any other odd ones? Rickshaws, quad bikes, tractors?
You guessed it. Concept hydrogen auto rickshaws in India from Mahindra and Bajaj.
The tuk-tuks.
Yeah. There's a hydrogen quad bike called H2, even concept designs for hydrogen tractors. And Cummins, the big engine maker, is working with Versatile on 15-liter hydrogen combustion engines for agriculture.
Big hydrogen engines for farms, so burning it again.
Seems like it for those heavy-duty applications. Shows the breadth of exploration.
Incredible range. And of course, if you have engines, people want to race them. Any hydrogen speed demons?
Oh, yeah. Gotta go fast. Ford built a prototype Fusion Hydrogen 999 race car, took it to Bonneville Salt Flats in 2007, hit over 207 mph.
207 on hydrogen.
They used a compressed oxygen tank on board to boost the power.
Cheating a bit with extra oxygen.
Well, optimizing. And Ohio State University's Buckeye Bullet, too. That thing hit 286 mph in 2008. Land speed record for a hydrogen vehicle.
Almost 300 miles per hour. That's serious speed.
Definitely. There was even a Hydrogen Electric Racing Federation for a while sponsoring races, so people were trying to push the performance envelope, too.
Not just about being green, but being fast. Okay, we keep mentioning these two types, fuel cells and combustion. Let's quickly recap the hydrogen internal combustion engine idea.
Right. So, different from fuel cells, which make electricity chemically, combustion engines are basically modified gas engines.
Like the one from 1807.
Exactly, same principle. They burn hydrogen instead of gasoline. The main plus, emission-wise, is the exhaust is mostly water vapor. Big cut in pollutants.
And it's not a new idea, as we said. Conversions happened in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, people tinkering. Mazda actually invested quite a bit in it more recently, using their Wankel rotary engines.
Why rotary engines?
They argued it might be cheaper to adapt existing engine tech rotary or piston than to tool up completely for fuel cells. Lower manufacturing hurdles, potentially.
An economic argument for sticking with combustion, but using hydrogen.
Okay.
Now, let's switch back to fuel cells, the more common approach in recent vehicles. What about the tech itself? Big challenge is cost, right?
Huge challenge. Historically, a major barrier. It's mainly down to expensive materials, especially platinum.
Platinum is the catalyst.
Exactly. It works really well, but it's rare and pricey. You mentioned Toyota losing maybe $100,000 per Mirai initially. That gives you an idea.
Wow. So how do you fix that?
Lots of research is going into it, reducing the amount of platinum needed or finding alternatives. Scientists in Copenhagen, for example, are working on new catalysts using durable nanowires. Needs much less platinum.
That sounds promising. Less platinum equals lower cost.
That's the hope. It could be a real game changer if they can scale it up reliably.
What about other fuel cell issues? Like cold weather? Didn't early ones struggle in the cold?
They did, yeah. Starting up, maintaining performance, it was a problem. But honestly, that's largely been solved now.
Really? How?
Better materials, better thermal management systems. Modern fuel cell cars work pretty well in sub-zero temperatures. Users don't report big range drops like they used to.
So freezing isn't a showstopper anymore.
Not really. Researchers even use fancy techniques like neutron radiography to watch ice form inside fuel cells during cold starts, just to fine-tune things even further. But the basic problem is mostly licked.
Good to know. And how long do these fuel cells last? Is it like an engine needing a rebuild eventually?
The lifespan is actually pretty decent now, generally comparable to other vehicle components. PEM fuel cells, the common type in cars, can last around 7,300 hours of operation.
7,000 hours. How does that translate to miles?
It depends on driving conditions, but it's enough for a typical vehicle lifetime. Much better than the early generation.
Okay, so durability is getting there too. Now let's zoom out again. Hydrogen is a fuel. It doesn't just bubble up from the ground. Where does it come from?
Crucial point. Hydrogen isn't like oil or gas you dig up. It's an energy carrier, like electricity. You have to make it.
How do we make it now mostly?
Overwhelmingly, like 98% as of 2019, it comes from steam methane reforming.
SMR.
Steam methane.
Sounds like natural gas is involved.
Exactly. You react natural gas with high temperature steam. It produces hydrogen, but...
There's the catch again.
Yep. It also produces carbon dioxide, CO2, a lot of it.
So most hydrogen today is made in a process that releases greenhouse gases.
That's the reality, which kind of undercuts the whole clean fuel idea if you're using gray hydrogen, as it's sometimes called.
Gray hydrogen, okay. So what are the cleaner ways? the green hydrogen?
The main one is electrolysis, using electricity to split water, H2O, into hydrogen and oxygen.
Simple chemistry.
On paper, yeah. And if that electricity comes from renewable sources, wind, solar, hydro, then the hydrogen you produce is essentially emissions-free. That's green hydrogen.
There's always a but.
But it's currently more expensive than gray hydrogen from SMR. That's the big hurdle. There are other methods being researched using heat, biomass, but electrolysis with renewables is the main focus for green H2.
And what about efficiency? How much energy do we lose just making the hydrogen?
Quite a bit, actually. Current methods, including production and then compressing or liquefying it for storage, you can lose anywhere from 25% to maybe 50% of the energy you started with.
So you put in 100 units of energy, you might only get 50 or 75 units worth of hydrogen energy out.
Something in that ballpark, yeah. Improving that efficiency is really important to make hydrogen competitive.
And the overall environmental impact. It really boils down to how you make the hydrogen.
Absolutely. If we keep making it from fossil fuels, we're still generating greenhouse gases. The whole promise relies on scaling up green hydrogen production massively.
Are places doing that, using renewables?
Some are starting. Iceland uses its geothermal energy. Denmark uses wind power. Places with lots of renewables are exploring it, but it needs huge scale-up globally.
Okay, so we make the hydrogen, hopefully green. Then we need to store it and move it around. What are the challenges there?
Storage on the vehicle usually means compressing it like crazy, 350 or 700 times atmospheric pressure.
Wow, high pressure. Needs strong tanks.
Very strong, specially made carbon composite tanks. Because hydrogen, as a gas, takes up a lot of space for the energy it holds. Low volumetric density.
So you have to squeeze it hard or liquefy it, which we said takes energy.
Right. That's why people are looking at carriers like ammonia, too. Easier to handle, potentially.
And then the big one, infrastructure. Getting into the vehicles. Refueling stations.
The Achilles heel, many would say. Building a whole new fuel infrastructure is a massive, expensive undertaking. Ports, storage, pipelines, and crucially, the stations themselves.
How are we doing on stations?
Not great, especially compared to electric charging. As of 2024, the U.S. had only 53 public hydrogen stations, and 52 of them were in California.
52 in one state. That's not exactly nationwide coverage?
Not even close. Compare that to over 65,000 electric charging stations across the U.S. Japan is a bit ahead on hydrogen, maybe had 90 stations by 2017, but still it's tiny compared to what's needed.
And that lack of stations was behind that lawsuit in California.
Exactly. People bought the cars, then couldn't reliably fuel them. It's a classic chicken and egg problem. No cars, no stations, no cars.
Big problem to solve. Are there agreed-upon rules and safety standards for handling all this high-pressure hydrogen?
That's been part of the challenge, too. Developing and getting everyone to adopt consistent codes and standards for safety, storage, handling. It takes time. Having clear, uniform rules is essential before businesses and consumers fully embrace it.
So, lots of hurdles. Clean production, efficiency, storage, massive infrastructure needs, standards. Is there any government push to help overcome these? Any official support in the U.S.?
There's some support. Fuel cell buses, for instance, have received federal funding, and some states are active. NYSERDA in New York offers incentives for hydrogen trucks and buses.
Targeting those heavy-duty sectors where it might make more sense.
Seems to be the focus, yeah. Recognizing the potential in specific areas.
Okay, but despite that support and all the research, there's a lot of skepticism, a lot of criticism about hydrogen cars specifically, isn't there?
Oh, definitely. A very vocal contingent argues that widespread hydrogen cars in the next few decades are basically a pipe dream.
A pipe dream. Strong words.
Yeah. Some call it a dangerous distraction from battery EVs, which are here, now, and improving rapidly.
That's such strong criticism.
Efficiency is a big word. Critics like Joseph Romm have called hydrogen cars one of the least efficient, most expensive ways to reduce greenhouse gases.
Because of those energy losses in making the hydrogen and converting it back.
Exactly. You lose energy making it, compressing it, transporting it, then converting it back to electricity in the fuel cell. The overall well-to-wheels efficiency is often lower than for a battery EV charged directly from the grid.
And the cost of the infrastructure.
Astronomical, they argue. Building a whole new nationwide hydrogen refueling network, the cost would be prohibitive compared to leveraging the existing electrical grid for EV charging.
Plus the issue of where the hydrogen comes from.
Right. If it's mostly gray hydrogen from natural gas, the life cycle emissions might not even be better than efficient gasoline cars, let alone EVs powered by renewables.
So the argument is, if you have clean electricity, just put it straight into an EV battery. It's simpler and more efficient.
That's the core of the critique, yeah.
Yeah.
Multiple studies have suggested battery EVs are just more economical and energy efficient for cutting transport emissions.
And there was something about hydrogen leaks themselves being a problem, not just safety, but climate.
Yes, that's a newer but significant concern. Hydrogen itself, if it leaks into the atmosphere, acts as an indirect greenhouse gas. It reacts in the atmosphere in ways that prolong the life of methane and affect ozone.
So leaked hydrogen makes global warming worse.
Estimates suggest its warming effect could be over 11 times stronger than CO2 over shorter time frames, like 20 years.
Yeah.
So minimizing leaks is absolutely critical across the whole hydrogen chain.
Wow. Okay, so efficiency, infrastructure cost, source emissions, leak potential, quite a list of criticisms. Let's touch on safety again. How risky is hydrogen, really?
Well, it does have specific hazards. It ignites very easily low ignition energy, and it burns with a lot of energy. Plus, being the smallest molecule, it can leak through tiny gaps that other fuels wouldn't.
Like that Hyundai recall for leaks.
Exactly. And there's hydrogen embrittlement. It can make metals brittle over time, which is a concern for tanks and pipes.
And you can't smell it if it leaks.
Correct. Odorless, colorless. You need detectors. There have been incidents at filling stations, and the supply chain is fragile. One problem at a production plant can knock out multiple stations.
So safety requires careful engineering and procedures.
Very careful. It's manageable, like other fuels, but the specific risks need robust solutions.
Okay, last comparison point. How does hydrogen stack up against other alternative fuels, like natural gas or biofuels?
Good question. Natural gas vehicles, NGVs, use methane. Methane actually has higher energy density than hydrogen, making storage a bit easier. And if you use biogas renewable natural gas, NGVs can be nearly carbon neutral.
And NGV tech is more established.
Yes, millions of NGVs are already on the road worldwide, with more infrastructure in place than for hydrogen. Then you have plug-in EVs, which we've seen are dominating the light vehicle market.
Right.
And for aviation, biofuels are an option, though producing enough sustainably has land use challenges. So hydrogen is competing in a space with several other alternatives, each with its own pros and cons.
It's a complex landscape of choices. This has been an absolutely fantastic, really thorough deep dive. Thank you so much for walking us through all the complexities of hydrogen vehicles.
My pleasure. It's definitely a technology with a fascinating past and a debatable but potentially significant future role. The exact shape of that role is still being written.
Absolutely. And hey, if you, our listeners, are finding these deep dives as interesting as we do,
Yeah, we hope you are.
then please make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. Don't miss out on any future explorations here on Tell Me More Stories Told as podcasts.
We'll keep digging into the stories behind the headlines, connecting the dots for you.
We've got lots more planned. Okay, so quick recap. We journeyed through this whole hydrogen world. Rockets, cars, trucks, buses, forklifts, even bikes.
We saw the history, that amazing 1807 engine, the modern contenders like Mirai and Nexo, and as surprising numbers for forklifts.
And we definitely navigated the big hurdles. Clean production, efficiency issues, safety worries, the huge infrastructure gap.
Yeah, the challenges are significant, no doubt about it.
And it seems pretty clear that while hydrogen has this undeniable potential as a clean energy carrier, its path to widespread use, especially in cars, is really tough, particularly when you compare it to how fast battery EVs are moving.
Which brings us to that final thought, that question to leave with our listeners.
Right. Considering everything we've discussed, the energy losses, the infrastructure costs, the competition, is hydrogen's main future role likely to be in specific niches? You know, long-haul trucks, maybe some industrial uses, aviation eventually, places where its unique properties really shine.
Or is there still a realistic path to a much broader hydrogen-powered world? Can breakthroughs in cheap, green hydrogen production and distribution change the entire equation?
What stands out most to you after hearing all this? Where do you see hydrogen fitting in? Something to think about.